here to talk about Vietnam. But since I'm talking about Vietnam, I want to be really specific about what I mean. Vietnam is a really weirdly loaded word for non-Vietnamese people. And I get it. Even though I'm half Vietnamese, I was born and raised in the US. But I think it's time that we reframe Vietnam for Western audiences. So first, it's not a war. Can I just say that? Right now, the median age is 32.5 years old. And that means most people there have never even seen armed conflict. Second, it's not shorthand for military failure or an era in American history. It's not just a dish or a beverage. It's also not a symbol for coffee market volatility. Vietnam is a place. Okay, now that we've gotten over that. It's a dynamic, growing market. It's the world's trading partner. It's a member of several international organizations and free trade agreements. It's a growing market and a dynamic market. It's experienced an average of 6% annual GDP growth over the last 20 years, except for the pandemic when it only hit 3.5% growth. Per capita income is projected to double in just about 4 years. So this is Vietnam today. So what do you imagine coffee culture in Vietnam is like? Well, it turns out Vietnam has several coffee cultures, and robusta rules. Nearly everyone drinks coffee every day, literally everywhere. For example, this is the cafe apartment. It's an apartment building in downtown Saigon that's almost entirely cafes. And the coffee culture is extremely diverse. And like most things in Saigon, it's a mashup. Specialty arabica and fine robusta often show up on the same menu. So how did we get here? Well, the French brought coffee to Vietnam. Arabica came in the late 1850s and robusta about 30 years later. But production didn't really begin to take off until the late 1980s under the Doi Mai, or renewal policy movement, when the Vietnamese government identified coffee as a major economic growth engine. And we'll just say that internationally, not everyone was happy about that. But here we are 30 years later, and we're beginning to look at robusta a little bit differently. I had to put that up there to underscore the point. Who in this room would have imagined just a few years ago that we would be taking it seriously? There are several opportunities to taste different species of coffee here this week. And fine robusta will be all over the show floor. So I urge you to give it a try, because diversity in coffee is a good thing. The fine robusta movement is alive and gaining a legitimacy on its own. Turns out treating it like a quality product changes the quality. As a plant, along with the other species, it holds potential for climate change resilience. And look, arabica and robusta can't do each other's jobs, so it's not a zero sum. It's not like if we all start acknowledging this that we have to change our t-shirts and start cheering for the other team. So its unique combination of novelty and staying power is exposing new opportunities for creative marketers and entrepreneurs. I was a bit surprised by this data. We're looking at 2020 production in number of 60-kilogram bags. And I want to highlight that although arabica makes up less than 4% of Vietnam's total production, it still produces just as much as or more than more popular origins. Per capita consumption, there's also what we would call a domestic closed-loop specialty market, and I'll get into that in a moment. So right now, there's consumers willing to pay enough for specialty arabica in Vietnam that there's really not much available for export. And really, why should there be? Right? So here we're looking at some green coffee prices for specialty arabica and fine robusta in Vietnam. And some of these are prices that you'd expect to see for exclusive lots or auction coffees. And while they're good coffees, coffees that I buy, coffees that my customers love, they are priced at a premium above comparable coffees from other countries. And currently, roasters in Vietnam are scrambling to make sure we have enough for the year. So don't ask me about exporting. I don't even know where to start there. I'll also say that I don't think that consumers of specialty coffee in producing countries are going to displace coffees available for export. So that's not the point that I'm trying to make. But I will say buying unique coffees and top lots is only going to get more competitive. And in my working life in Vietnam, I can see that there doesn't really need to be external pressure moving us to make improvements and innovation. We have a feedback loop that's local, and we're building it stronger and stronger and pushing quality and experimentation in ways that I haven't seen yet. So check this out. This is the price of espresso at the average Vietnamese specialty cafe. And they look like prices that you could see just about anywhere else. So, you know, it kind of begs a question, maybe a rhetorical question. If the majority of these coffees are sourced from just a couple hundred kilometers away, and the price is the same as you'd see in like Portland, where does that margin go? Okay, next up, I want to show off the cool kids of Vietnamese specialty coffee. Now, while some of these are, you know, obviously standard-looking specialty cafes, there's also a lot of innovation in design and customer experience. And most of the coffee sold in Vietnamese cafes is that it's actually local, not just roasted locally. So this is a source of pride and an opportunity for awareness for especially young audiences that quickly adopt the language of curiosity and tasting notes when talking with us about what's on the menu at our cafe. So we have to remember, like, this isn't really the third wave to them. This is the wave. And so what we're also witnessing is in this explosion of the middle class there is the proliferation of connoisseurship and how this is driving novelty. And so a lot of young people are really beginning to have fun and getting really deep into new hobbies and getting passionate really quickly. An emerging market in Vietnam is a new type of tourism. During the strict COVID border closures, we saw a shift to domestic travel, including farm stays and people staying overnight in cute places like this, and picking and processing coffee and hanging out with farmers for lunch or dinner. And regionally, it seems that specialty coffee is kind of becoming a lifestyle with a rise in standards of living and disposable income among a relatively young population with a lot of pent-up demand. Most young entrepreneurs are globally connected, digital natives. So for example, you'll see a hot new cafe concept in Berlin or Seoul, and then just a couple years later, a new cafe in Saigon inspired by that visual style. So we're also seeing the same type of socializing and individualized experience signaling among youth all across Southeast Asia. They're gathering at cafes to take selfies and portraits, whether they're engaging with the beverages or just the space. And one of the main benefits of this type of spending is on local specialty coffee is that the value gained from these locally produced coffees stays inside the economy. It's a closed loop, if you will. The cafe culture may be imported, but only a portion of the coffee is. We regularly see locally produced specialty on offer alongside coffees from Ethiopia, Guatemala, and Colombia. We also see a direct line of communication between cafe owners and roasters and the people who produce the coffees that they serve. It's literally a 45-minute flight from Saigon to Dalat, where a lot of Vietnam's specialty arabica is grown. And producers come down to the cities for new cafe openings and events, where they're often treated like local celebrities, local coffee celebrities anyway. People recognize their names and faces from social media marketing. And roasters and baristas visit the farm to share ideas in their native language for testing and iteration that are instant. So how can buyer-producer relationships benefit from what's happening in places? Buyer-producer relationships outside of these closed loops benefit from what's happening in places like Vietnam. Well, for one, maybe buying trips can be more equitable. Think exchange versus extraction. A great example is the buying experience I hear about from friends in fine teas. The buyer is the one who presents the product, they brew it, and set the price. And in general, they set the tone for the interaction. We have to remember that specialty coffee began as an act of attribution to origin as the sources, but still somehow managed to center the buyer and the downstream benefactors. An authentic coffee, it was transmitted, shows a transparent path back to the place of origin, right? They would still somehow make the origin experience part of the brand's identity. But I mean, this was an important shift away from the nameless coffee of generations ago. It would go on, this origin-centered approach would go on to shine a light on conditions at origin among producing communities, which was very important to show. Hoping to improve conditions by first, like, engaging more, and then second, paying more. So are some of us still centering the agenda and experience of buyers? Something I see in social media and blog posts and advertisements is the buyer as protagonist. The marketing copy is about a journey or an adventure or the good works done by the brand. Is this type of approach still necessary? I think it may be time to move beyond it. But I want to be careful here because issues of poverty and inequality still exist at origin, and we need to keep doing the work of helping to change that. But how we talk about that work could be different. One small shift, respecting privacy and self-determination when sharing stories. When we characterize those who grow, pick, and process coffees, what benefits accrue in their direction? How's this articulated? And to what end? Sometimes it seemed to me that stories of inequality and poverty were shared in order to motivate consumers to pay more for coffee, as in, this is where your money goes. Is that sort of messaging still necessary? I think, based on what I've seen, consumers are willing to pay for high-quality coffees without benefit of stories from origin that may inadvertently objectify people. I believe that what's happening in places like Vietnam, where the buyer and the producer are peers, may be an interesting place to spark ideas. Imagine taking a cue from Vietnam's specialty movement, where the grower is presented as an artisan, and well-known farmers are celebrated as local business leaders. We have similar reverence in the US for, let me back up just a second. This is Mr. Sun in Dalat, and he regularly hosts baristas and coffee enthusiasts from around the country who work alongside him during the harvest as volunteers because he's a rock star, right? We do have similar reverence in the US for winemakers, butchers, organic vegetable farmers, even coffee producers in Hawaii and California. Think about the Instagram accounts of bespoke sheep farmers and heirloom tomato growers. It's about the identity of the artisan as a person and less about the economic and social circumstances of their small business. The specialty coffee industry has been one of the more considerate and forward-thinking business groups with the intention of an awakened consciousness towards coffee people from all backgrounds. It's not perfect, but it is trying to be better, which is much more than I can say for other business groups. I believe it's time that we apply that intention further upstream towards producers, towards farm workers, and towards emerging consumer markets. The face of specialty coffee has definitely changed. I remember my first jobs in the Pacific Northwest in specialty coffee. I was so excited to meet Nick Cho and Trish Rothgeb. I had been in a lot of rooms where I was the only person who looked like me, and it felt really awkward. It feels good to be in this room right now. I can't really say or hear this enough, and it may be a trope by now, but representation matters. We've all seen major shifts in specialty coffee over the past 15 to 20 years, and I've seen the future. It's at origin and in emerging economies. The next cool things are going to come from there, I promise. In general, I hope the messages that you take from me today are, one, Vietnam isn't an underdog that needs us to root for it. It's a sophisticated and evolving culture that's only going to increase its influence on global trends. And two, I hope that what I've shared today can at least help to inspire new ways of thinking and talking about producers, consumers, origin, and emerging economies. Also, it's a great time to get out and travel again, and we'd love to see you in Vietnam this year. Thanks.